Okay, hi everyone, this is Thomas Newman of VIVA, and I'm joining my colleagues Hugo and Hugh today.
Hello.
Hi guys.
For this Ask Me Anything session. I think this is the fourth one we've done, but it's the first one in about a month. So these are free sessions that we run. I think we'll run probably one a month from now on, where students can come along and ask any CIMA related questions that they have. So if you've got doubts about the case studies or any objective test exams, the best approach to study, any of that, any questions along those lines, and we'll be able to help you. So there's a chat box to the right of the webinar there where you can type your comments. So I see people are joining, and it's a good idea to make use of that if you've got a question. Okay, so that's one way that you can ask us a question. And the second way, and this is something we've experimented with over the last few sessions, but hasn't actually worked that well, is there is a speak request icon as well. It's a little hand that you can raise, and by doing that, you should be able to join via webcam and actually speak your question. So that's a nice alternative. You know, we'd love to see you and hear you if you've got a question. But if that fails, the chat box is your friend. Okay. So that's it. We'll get started. So any questions, guys?
I see Melina. Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Friday to you as well. It's very nice. Thanks.
Yeah, end of the week. So it's for those of you, of course, who are preparing exams. I suppose the weekend will be will involve study. So we're getting close. So OCS exams next week, I think, right? They start on Wednesday. Yeah. So
not long left.
Not long. Okay,
the
guys,
MCS after that.
What?
The MCS after that, then. So
yeah, following week, and then the week after is the SCS. Yeah, exactly. So don't be shy, guys. Make use of the chat box.
Maybe we got some big long questions coming through.
Yeah, I reckon there are a few good ones. Keep us on our toes.
Yeah.
There we go.
Melina with a good one. Let me see. Do you want to take that one, Hugh?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just read it out so everyone can kind of hear what it is. So is there some general structure that we can apply to the answers depending on the verb used in the question? I.e. identify, evaluate, recommend. For example, questions like identify challenges of approach X, Y, and Z. I suppose the answer structure would be something like identify the main issue, identify the main challenges. Why is this a challenge? How to overcome this? Yeah, it's a good question, actually. So the verb used is important to an extent. So it depends what level you're at, Melina, but you know, if you're at the SCS level, normally evaluate means that you have to give a bit of a discussion about what it is that you're talking about. If you have a chance, you can type into your favorite search engine the hierarchy of verbs from CIMA, and they actually tell you what those verbs mean. They're at the beginning of the textbooks as well. So if you own, by chance, the Kaplan textbooks, they're at the first page there. If you own the BPP textbooks, they're in there as well, I think, as well. If they're not, they're freely available online anyway. And CIMA actually tell you each verb that they use, what that means. Many times it doesn't matter too much. It's more so important at the SCS level. If you see evaluate, typically it's more of a thorough discussion than explain. Explain is more of a basic verb. So evaluate is what they call a level 5 verb. So it means it's higher. It's kind of requires a higher level of thought, whereas explain is a bit more basic. So it's a good question. To answer the question in detail, I recommend you look at that hierarchy of verbs if you get a chance.
Yeah, good question indeed. Joan asks, hey all, I see part 1 of the pre-scene analysis was loaded. Will part 2 also be loaded? Okay, so we would need to know which pre-scene you're talking about? Is it the OCS, SCS, MCS? If you're a VIVA customer, you have access to all of those, the entire pre-scene analysis, which is on the website. So part 1 of the pre-scene analysis we run for free. That's a free webinar session that you can join. It's available for everyone. But after that, we only produce content for our customers. Okay, so the second half of the pre-scene analysis will be part of that. That goes up on the website at vivatuition.com and can only be accessed by VIVA customers. Okay.
So Alessa has a question. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Sorry if I didn't. Are there a set of answers for each case study variant, and do they mark strictly according to them? Will a student be awarded for valid points made even if they are not in the exam suggested solution? So it's a really good question. And the answer to that is it depends. So it depends on the questions being asked. If you look at the solutions that are on the CGMA.org website, you'll see that they have the marking guides inside them. And those marking guides are split into what's known as traits. So does your answer have this trait? And in some situations, the answer has to be technically within a set of kind of parameters. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just, for example, evaluate the risks associated with this decision for the SCS. Sometimes it's just, if you have a valid risk, you could have loads of different ones, for example. See, there's lots of different answers. The suggested solution, it even says at the very top of the CIMA website, these are just suggestions. They're not necessarily the only answers you can have. So they give you that warning. So that gives you kind of an idea. They're not the only answers you can have. I recommend, though, you look at the actual marking guides, the traits. They'll tell you what they're looking for. Okay, so that'll give you an idea.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is from Aniket, who asks how to maintain a consistent approach while studying, preparing for the case study in case other objective tests are exempted. Okay, so
I can take that one if you want, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would suggest that you read. There is an article that we have in our blog for free, which recommends how you should approach the case study, utilizing our resources as well, for example. So, if you just give me a second, actually, I can send the link. I can share the link to that article.
I'll get it up, Hugo.
Yeah, you can do that, Tom. Yeah. So that's the first thing I would suggest is looking at that, because it gives you a good general structure and a kind of an approach based on the science of learning. So the best study approaches and how to retain information most effectively. So if you follow that structure generally, that's a good start. With regard to exemptions from objective papers, this is always a tricky one. Because the temptation sometimes is for students who've been exempted from objective papers is to go back and basically study the entire objective subject. And of course, when you're doing a case study, you're restricted in terms of the time that you can spend doing that. So you have to strike a very careful balance. One of the things that I would suggest is often people who get exemptions from objective subjects, they'll already have a fairly good base of knowledge, especially when it comes to the more financial components, for example, from the F and to a lesser extent, perhaps from the P pillars. And so often what students find is that most of the kind of the holes in their knowledge are in the E pillar often. So I would recommend that perhaps you start with the E subject, depending, of course, on what level you're at. It could be E1, E2, or E3. And start with the videos in the foundational tab of the course contents if you are a VIVA user, a VIVA customer. If you go into the foundational materials of our course, of our courses there for the case study, you'll find objective review videos, and they give you a very good high-level overview of everything that's included in, for example, E2 if you're studying the MCS, for example, and that will give you a good sense of topics that sound unfamiliar to you, things that sound strange to you, and those will be the first point of contact in terms of going back and looking at and trying to fill in your knowledge gaps, for example, by going back and looking at an entire E course or E2 course. So you could narrow it down that way, start with the things that sound strangest or least familiar to you. You could do the same then for the F and the P subjects. Again, look at those review videos in the foundational tab of VIVA's course. Identify, jot down those things that sound different or maybe not familiar to you, or something that you need to go back and refresh your memory on, and then go do a deeper dive on either, for example, VIVA's resources, which you have full access to with the All Access, or you could use, for example, some other tuition provider if you have access to their courses on PRF, something like that, or a textbook even. So that would be the way I would approach it. So you have the general structure, which is in the article that I mentioned. Free article is a good way of approaching the entire case study preparation. And then in terms of filling in those gaps, I would say start with those review videos, for example, in the foundational materials section. Pick out those things that sound most or least familiar, I would say, or strangest to you. Start with those. And then go back to the case study content, for example, with our course, and look at the applied videos, especially in terms of how to apply the theories from E, P, and F. I think that would be the best approach.
Yeah,
for sure.
Great. Okay, so there's a question there on the OCS pre-scene. Cima made a couple of changes, and AH is asking, could you advise what they are? And I think they were very, very minor changes. I'm really not even sure why they made such tiny changes, because there was no material impact on I think it was in the statement of profit loss, right? There were 2 entries, Hugh, on there that were slightly altered.
It's page 18, AH. So, they made 2, as Thomas said, they made 2 entries, 2 small adjustments. They made no material impact. We're not really sure why they did that. It didn't really make any major impact. So I would almost ignore them. Yeah. It makes no major difference.
Yeah. Because I think, the net profit figure was the exact same. It had no impact on that. Anyway, yeah, it's a strange one.
There's a question just after that's from Alex Andrew that says, do you think they'll provide the CGMA cost transformation model areas like they did in the previous years? So this is the OCS that Alex Andrew is talking about. So there was a question in, I think, the May sitting in 2020 that had a question about the CGMA cost transformation model, and they gave you the model in the answer, or in the question as a reference material. And it's a good question. So do I remember it, or do I hope it comes up on the paper? I would say remember it. Don't take chances with the paper. It's a very straightforward answer. I know it's easy for me to say that, but you can always use it inside your answers with ABC as well, and cost management. So there's areas of the CGMA cost transformation model you could use in other parts of your answer. Accelerates a business in your OCS that's looking to cut costs, control costs. It's a business that didn't do well in 2020. It's recovering its operating profit margin by 5.2% in 2021. So it's not increasing sales. It's only doing that by cutting costs. So, why not know it anyway? You could use it in your answers for other things as well.
Yeah. Radha asks, is practicing mocks 1 week before the objective test exam ideal to pass it? So it's not ideal, Radha, to be, blunt, because ideally you would be practicing mocks before that, okay? But it is good that you're practicing mocks at least, because too many students actually, they avoid practicing questions and mocks entirely, which is a big mistake. And they just focus on, reading the text or something like that. The ideal approach is to work question practice into your study from day one. So as you work through chapters or units, there is ongoing question practice. That's the ideal approach, okay? Vicky asks, what is the latest that we can submit a mock for marking, please, for the MCS? Okay, Vicky, so you are a VIVA customer with access to marking services. So the MCS exams start on Wednesday, I think. And the advice we give to students is to submit your last mock for marking no later than 5 days before the exam. Okay, so 5 days before you're set to start to do your exam. And that would be the advice that we would give you to make sure that you get it back on time and you can actually review it.
So there's a question from Palessa. Again, hopefully I'm saying it correctly there. In the past, have there been questions that were a bit ambiguous and a good number of students wrongly interpreted them? Yeah, loads of questions, loads and loads of questions like that. So if you're doing the SCS, a classic example in the last sitting was there was a question that said, what are the challenges associated with understanding the acceptability of this strategy? So you weren't asked about what is the acceptability, it's what are the challenges in determining. There's two completely different answers. There was a question before in the paper that came up around rights issues. And the question was, what are the considerations that we should have for a rights issue, not the impact? So the student talks, typically it'll reduce our gearing, it'll reduce the share price, but it's what do we have to consider? So you have to consider the underwriter, you have to consider the price, the discount. So it's two different ways of interpreting a very, very small change to the question. So it's such an important point. You have to really read the question carefully in the case papers.
Yeah,
so for sure.
Absolutely. Danielle asks, hello all, I'm stuck on the P3 objective test exam. It is my only objective test left and I've failed it twice now. I haven't had problems with any other objective test questions, but I can't seem to crack this one. I find this to be a very subjective topic for an objective exam. Any tips for P3, please? Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit of a tricky one. It's more like an E subject, really. It's got a lot of enterprise stuff that would fit in the enterprise subjects, and they tend to be a little bit more subjective, less black and white, less clear on what the exact answer is. And I suppose you're getting a lot of the select all that apply type answers to questions, which are always tricky. So with those kinds of questions, for example, what we tend to advise students to do is to narrow down the options. So that makes it less intimidating. So if you're presented with a question that gives you 5 or 6 potential answers, and you're asked to select all answers that apply, so it could be 2 that are correct, it could be 3, it could be 4, etc. What you want to start doing there is to rule out the obviously wrong options. So you might have a list of 6 options there, and you might be able to rule out 2 or 3 straight away, and you're increasing your odds then of getting the right answer. So that's one thing that occurs to me. Beyond that, really, it's about lots and lots of question practice, as much as you can do. And from day one, as I said before, you want to be doing ongoing question practice. After every unit or chapter, you're practicing questions as you go along. And another thing to do is to make sure, as you're going through the syllabus, that once you've gone through a topic, that you don't just leave it aside. You want to be going back and reviewing the old topics again and again. So when you're on chapter 6, you'd have done chapters 1 to 5 already. And I think what a lot of students do is they won't touch chapters 1 to 5 again until right before the exam. What you want to do is when you get to chapter 6, 7, you want to be taking time to go back and review the stuff that you've covered briefly from chapters 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 again. So you're not neglecting any of that, and you keep all of that information fresh. So there are 2 tips that I would have. I'm not sure if Hugo and Hugh have additional tips.
No, I wouldn't have anything to add to that, really. I think they're the most important points. Hugh?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, practice is so important for P3 and just going through different scenarios. The only thing I'd say, Danielle, is if you're doing P3, make sure you know VAR. So that's the only maths type question that comes up. So you'll know you got that one right if you're kind of going through the questions and you're looking for non-subjective ones. If you know that area well, then you can kind of tick that one off. That's one question that less to worry about. So I suppose that's one thing you can do.
Yeah. Hannah's putting us on the spot here. She asks, have any of the questions from VIVA's MCS mocks ever come up in the real exam? She says, fingers crossed you say yes. So yes, they have, definitely. And we're not going to lie and say that they always come up and they're exactly the same as the mocks. And any tuition provider that says they can guarantee you what's going to come up in the exam, it's just not going to be the case. There are so many things that CIMA can test you on that it's difficult to get it exactly right. But what we find is that we kind of hit on the general themes that tend to come up in the exam. So CIMA might ask the question in a different way, or focus on some other angle that they're working on, whereas we would focus on another angle. But we tend to get the themes right. So yeah, that's what I would say.
There was one specific one, just to clap ourselves on the back, in a P2 applied session last sitting. So was it May? November, February, sorry. For Pride Blocks, which was the MCS paper, in the P2 applied session. Sometimes in the applied sessions we have scenarios, and one of the scenarios was that Pride Blocks, I think there's some situation, you had to see what impact that had on the capitals in integrated reporting, and the exact same question came up. Now, that's not to say that we're miracle workers, but it just shows that, you know, we can get it right. And if you're going to those sessions and you're looking at the scenarios, you know, law of averages would suggest between the mock papers and all the scenarios inside the applied classes, something similar will come up. As Thomas said, the scenarios, you know, some of the questions, the themes will be there.
Yeah. So, you know, okay, yeah, I mean, we can probably give ourselves a pat on the back for some of the work we've done in the past. Students have come to us quite a lot, actually, and said, you know, there have been windows where we've got a lot right, and students will come and say, look, you know, 3 of the 4 variants I had were questions I was asked directly by VIVA, and, you know, that's just pure luck. We just got lucky there. Whereas there are other sessions where maybe one of the topics would be exactly the same as we've asked. But generally, as I said, we're getting the themes right. We put in a lot of work into the mock exams, so we pride ourselves on those. We're very, very careful about, you know, weighting the questions in the right way, the exact same way that Cima does it. You know, we're always going back and reviewing the old Cima exams to consider whether this is a realistic scenario or not. We always try to ensure there's a good mix of E, F, and P topics. So we're really, really meticulous about it and take a lot of care with that. That's entirely down actually to Hugo and Hugh. You know, they work very, very hard on the mock questions. So the article link, as you can see, is in there. That's a good one to read if you're wondering about a good approach to studying well for the case study. So Batho says, good day. Are we encouraged to refer to previous section's content when answering subsequent section questions? So I assume there, Batho, you're talking about the case study exam. So there's a little bit of a problem, because with the case study, once you go forward to a new section, you can't actually go back. So that's one of the things with the case study exam. That's not a problem for the objective test exam, because you can move back and forth between questions. But with the case study, once you move forward, you're not able to go back. But what is a good idea is to refer to previous sections, so that you're kind of building on the information that you've been provided with in previous sections. So the idea with the case study exam is that it's meant to be a realistic scenario. Okay, it's meant to reflect the real world of work. It's meant to be the kind of questions you could be asked by your boss, your boss's boss, for example. And the scenario that Cima tries to present is meant to be a realistic scenario. So draw on the information that you're given in the exam. I think too few students actually do that. Too few students make use of the information they're given in the exam paper. So you'll be given tables of figures and articles, etc. And Cima likes to see you refer to that information and use it in your answers. Okay, so whether that's from the current section or previous sections. Okay, it's a good idea. Guys, you want to tackle the question from Jean Ali about technical issues in the exam?
Oh, I see this. Yeah. So I'll just read it out for everyone. So Janani says, how should we go about resolving any technical issues during the exam, i.e. internet connection, losing time in a section? Is there a special consideration for this, or would we get disqualified? So that's a good question. I don't think there is. I don't think there's any concession if you have any technical issues during the online invigilation, which I'm assuming that you're talking about there. I don't think there's any, you don't get any extra time if you have an internet connection drop off. I don't actually know what happens if say, for example, you're sitting the paper and your internet just completely drops off. There is a proctor who looks at you while you're doing your paper. So I can only assume that if your internet connection drops off, there's a major issue there. I would assume. I'm not sure, guys, if you got any other input on that.
Not really, you know. It's a tricky one. You know, sometimes students can have difficulties during the exam, and it's you know, it's a little bit outside your control. So, you know, just try to focus on preparing well for the exam and having everything in order on the day, and you know, not adding to your nervousness by, you know, showing up late or connecting late. So you want to reduce those kinds of risks. So yeah, not much else to say on that, really.
So Sadakar says, should we use the SAF model for evaluating a project? So this is an SCS question, I'm assuming, or, you know, I would assume so here. So it depends on the question, depends how it's been phrased. You know, if you're asked, for example, in the SCS to evaluate a project or to evaluate a strategy, then yeah, do. But if you're asked for the implications, you know, sometimes you'll see in your paper, it'll just say, what are the implications of this? They're not necessarily asking what's the feasibility, what's the suitability, what's the acceptability. They're asking what are the long-term impacts. And you'll see that if you go through the past papers and, you know, you look at some recent questions, you'll see, you know, it's not always appropriate. So let the question guide you. In the last set of exam papers, a question specifically said, what's the suitability, acceptability, and feasibility of this particular strategy? So in that case, of course. But if you're not asked, you know, specifically to evaluate a strategy or that particular scenario where they even give you the keywords, I would think a bit more about it. You know, what are they really asking me here? I don't know, Hugo, to you, because you're kind of an e-expert, so I don't know if you...
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just echo exactly what you said. You know, it's very hard to say without knowing exactly what the question being asked is. And so I would not necessarily restrict yourself to the SAF model for evaluation in general. So I think that's probably the best thing I can say, really, is it does depend on the question. Unfortunately, I can't really add anything more specific.
It's always the way with the case papers.
Yeah.
So Sudhakar asks about COVID in the airport industry. Hugo, do you want to handle that one?
Sorry, let's see. For the current SCS case study, it's very tempting to quote the impact of COVID on the airport industry. For instance, Airfield does not have a diversified business and would have serious impact on this pandemic. Yeah, I can understand the temptation to talk about the pandemic situation, considering just how impactful it is for everyone, but also especially how much it would impact the airline industry in general. But I think you should resist that temptation on exam day, because CIMA has explicitly addressed this in the pre-scene document. They've this disclaimer at the beginning of the pre-scene document where they tell you that you can assume, unless otherwise stated, that the world we're operating in with Airfield is a non-pandemic, non-COVID world. Okay. Now, that's not to say, I mean, I can't say that it's impossible that CIMA will present some kind of scenario on the day of the exam that's something like a pandemic or something comparable, but I would say it's highly unlikely based on the fact that they've included that disclaimer. So you can assume, I think you can assume quite safely that you will not be asked anything which is relevant to a pandemic scenario, and therefore it's a bad idea for you to reference a pandemic situation. What I would say is it might be probable, or it might be, I think it's certainly conceivable that there will be situations which deal with very challenging economic circumstances. That might be something that would happen. So there might be, you know, various demand shocks in the scenario or in the world of the pre-scene that occur and that you have to deal with. So it's certainly worth thinking about those kinds of circumstances, an environment like that. But I would definitely avoid making a reference to, you know, the pandemic situation in your answer. That's my general advice.
Yeah, that's a good one. So Nwabisa, and again, excuse me if I got the pronunciation wrong there. With regard to P modules, so P1, P2, and P3, how do you cope with time pressure and calculations? That's, you know, a great question. Nwabisa. Definitely, I think all of the CIMA exams are time pressured. I think it's maybe the biggest challenge. And P certainly has a lot of calculations. So, the guys might have, their own thoughts on this one, but I feel that with the objective tests in general, what you want to do is you want to get off to a good start. You want to calm your nerves. And what you want to do is to try to answer the questions that you're sure of first. So that's the way, at least I liked to do it. So, as I said before, with the objective test, you can go forward and back very easily. So the first 15 or so minutes, I would spend answering the easiest questions, the ones that you're sure of. So, the first 15 minutes, you might find you've answered maybe 20 questions or something like that, the easy ones. And that easy will be different for everyone. We all have our preferences. And once you've done that, your nerves will have settled, and, you'll be calmer and you'll be thinking more clearly, I think. And then it's about going back the second time and answering sort of, going up to the next rung of the ladder, maybe taking the ones that you're less sure of, but you still feel that you can give them a good go, and you probably spend a little bit more time on those. And by the time you've done that, they'll take a little bit longer maybe, but you might have handled maybe 60% or 70% of all of the questions. And then you've got the toughest questions really until last. And there it's about, it's about, I suppose, narrowing down the number of potential correct options. So as I mentioned before, you're ruling out obviously wrong answers, and the toughest questions you might flag. So the ones you're absolutely the least sure of, you might flag, and you can go back on them then in the last sort of 10 minutes. But by that, by the time you get to the last 10 minutes and the toughest questions, maybe you'd have answered almost all of the questions, hopefully. And the last thing to say is that you should not leave any question unanswered. You should try to answer all questions. Okay, so that would be my approach. So you take the low-hanging fruit, as much of that as you can, and you bank the correct questions, and you put marks on the board then. So I'm not sure if Hugo and Hugh have anything to add, or they think differently about that.
No, I think it just comes down as well to practice. If you're doing, the tricky kind of investment appraisal calculations and EACs and stuff in P2, the more you do them, the quicker you get. You'll kind of remember, hopefully, even if you have a cost of capital of 10%, if you use that over and over and over again in your practice, you don't have to go to the tables to get it. Those small things can save you time. If you're doing loads of questions, you'll eventually get into the swing of it. So I think that helps.
Exactly. Great. Okay, so there's a question from Rada who says, I've seen Viva's all access offer in the past webinars. Is there an offer available now? I'm looking forward to purchase all access and when it will be available for me to use after I purchased it. That's the best question of the session so far, Rada. That's, Okay, so it's time for the shameless promotion. Yes, in previous webinars, we've offered our all access offer for a discount. Okay, so all access is basically our flagship offer. Really, it's the best offer we have. It's access to everything at vivatuition.com for 365 days, 1 year. Okay, so from the point of purchase. So if you purchase today, which is the 7th of May, isn't it? You would have access all the way through until midnight on the 6th of May 2022. Okay, so that normally retails for £299, which is a very, very good price point, we think, because you get access to 1,000 hours of CIMA content, more or less, between all of the video classes we have and the text and the questions. And it's both the objective tests and case studies, and they keep getting updated all the time. So yes, £299 is the normal price, but I'm going to launch the offer in the offers section of the webinar. I'm publishing that now. And for the next 48 hours, that will be available for £229. Okay, so it's a £70 discount. So you should see that. Let me know if you don't. It's in the offers section, so you should see that. And there's a link that will lead you through to that special offer. Thanks for asking, Rada. Okay. So
So Aniket says, what other skills or certifications are good to pick up while completing the CIMA qualification? Well, it's a good question, and I'm sure we all have different ideas there. You know, my recommendation would be to stick to one while you're doing CIMA. I think if you're doing CIMA, do CIMA, and that be it. You know what I mean? I think, you know, it's a tough one as it is, so I would just keep it to CIMA. But when you finish CIMA, there's a video we have actually on the VIVA YouTube channel, I believe, Thomas, where you discuss this very issue about life after CIMA, what comes next. You know, what do you do after that? It completely depends, to be honest, where your you know, your career aspirations are. What is it that you're trying to do? You know, are you someone who's currently working in management accounting? Are you in financial reporting? Are you in practice? Are you in industry? Are you in banking, advisory, consulting? It depends. You know, completely depends. Yeah. So I don't know what you guys are more knowledgeable about this than me, I think, but I would say just do CIMA first.
I think, and I'm just looking for that video now. I think what Hugh says is completely right. While you're doing CIMA, that's loads. It's loads in combination with a job, with a family, with you know people have different things going on. And it's quite an achievement to get through CIMA. So it's a great qualification. Yeah, I think absolutely. You know, full credit to you, Aniket. I think you have exactly the right attitude. Is that once that qualification ends, you're thinking beyond it, and you're thinking, how can I upskill? And I think that needs to be something that everyone thinks about. You know, lifelong learning is a way to really to stand out from the crowd, because I think so many people, you know, they finish in university or school or with a formal qualification like CIMA. That's all great, but then they never pick up another book or they never do another course, and I think that's a huge mistake. So upskilling. Yeah, absolutely. Some people like to just go on doing formal courses. I think people can go too far down that route. I think that, you know, knowledge and learning doesn't necessarily have to be tied to the formal, you know, learning environment. So masters and qualifications, as good as they all are. I think nowadays there are more options than ever. There are loads of great online qualifications or short courses or, you know, webinars and just all sorts of ways, you know, from long to short. There are so many options. As Hugh said, it depends on your circumstances and what you want to do with your career. Some people want to go, you know, to become finance directors, and then some good advice would probably be to identify finance directors, maybe who are working at your company, people who've made it and who are in those positions. And go talk to them and see what they have done. You know, talk to them about the kinds of formal qualifications they have, first of all, and it might surprise you how varied they actually are. But also talk about, you know, sort of think about their personality traits and sort of the soft skills that they have, because I think a lot of finance professionals focus too much on the technical skills. And I think if you're, you know, looking to make it to the top levels of organizations, soft skills become more and more important. So communication skills, both written and oral. So that's, you know, one way to think about it. You know, alternatively, there are people who finish the CIMA qualification and they don't want to go the commercial finance route. You know, I was like that myself. I did the commercial finance thing for a number of years, and then I decided I wanted to go and be an entrepreneur. So it's a different kind of skill set that I've been trying to build out. So that has influenced my decision in terms of ongoing learning. So I'm less about, technical financial skills now, and more about, stuff that lines up with our online business. So that would be, online marketing, and there's a little bit of, website development and things like that, and running a business. So that would involve processes and things like that, automation and project management and things like that. But so it's a little different for everyone. I'm going to include the link to that YouTube video that Hugh just referred to. And I'll just make one final comment here. And I think I mentioned it in that video, and I certainly mentioned it in an interview I did with a CGMA called Andrew Lynch recently. He's a really interesting guy. And we did an article with him, an interview, which I'll include the article link in a minute. And in that interview, one of the things that was striking was that Andrew thought about this quite a lot. And he had done, his accountancy qualification, he's CGMA, he's working as a finance director, but he's not entirely sure about what he will do next. He's thinking maybe of running his own business one day and things like that. But we talked about something called skill stacking, all right? And that's where you take seemingly unrelated skills and you kind of combine them and you end up with something very, very unique. Okay, so an example of that would be someone who's CGMA, who is a very good communicator. So someone, and in Andrew's case, when he was at university, he did stand-up comedy for a while, and he was a very good communicator. He was, so that obviously involves, it takes a lot of courage to get up and try to make people laugh, and you have to draw on your improvisation skills, etc. So you could see how that would work in the world of, in the world of business, being able to think on your feet and communicate well on the fly. Great. So that was really, really fascinating, I thought. But, you don't have to take it to that extreme. You could join, Toastmasters or something like that if you were not particularly strong on or not confident in your ability to speak in front of a crowd. That would be a great way to practice those skills. Another combination of skills that might be interesting would be CGMA plus data analysis, data science, knowing a little bit of programming. So understanding databases, things like SQL, things like that, and getting heavier into, financial modeling, for example. So you'd be drawing on things like, the term escapes me now. In Excel, you've got is it VBA? Yeah. So that's more technical. You're going beyond just the formulas that, everyone else is pretty much using. And that's quite valuable as well. So that might be a nice combination of skills as well. So you're trying to stack disparate and different skill sets, and that really will make you stand out. So they're just some ideas that that I would have on that point. It's a great question, Aniket, and I would encourage you all to keep thinking about what you'll be doing after CIMA.
So I think Vicky gave some information about what happens if there's technical issues in the middle of the exam. So from Vicky's experience, she knows someone who had technical issues. You get a reference from Pearson, so you can reset. They don't allow extra marks or anything like that, but they may be able to give you a free reset. So we've had some students in the past like that, where they've had issues with the connection. The exam has to be, I suppose, finished as a result. And the reason for that, guys, is because, the integrity of the exam is so important to CIMA. So if there's any disconnection, there could be a case where you mysteriously have notes in front of you and then, they suddenly go away when the connection comes back. So I suppose that's the reason for them being so strict about it. But with some exam centres opening up again, hopefully, depending on where you live, you may be able to sit them. If you're in the UK, if you're in Ireland, hopefully in a few months' time, you may be able to sit inside an exam centre where the internet connection is, solid, which is always a good thing. So, Alexandru, there's a question there. Yeah. So what to do the last couple of days before the OCS mock exams, theory review, reading the pre-scene?
That depends. I don't like giving that answer, but it's true. I mean, let's, for example, one of the things that we recommend in that article that was mentioned earlier on about, how you approach your study in the case study for the case study exam. One of the things that we suggest is that you start practicing mock exams as early as you can. Don't leave mock exams until the last minute. That's a mistake that students often make. They say, I'll put it off until I know everything, until I've watched all the videos and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So you should be doing ongoing mock exam writing and practice as best you can. And I think really it depends on how well you're doing in the mock exams or how well you feel you're doing in the mock exams. So one of the advantages, of course, of getting feedback from VIVA, getting the corrections done, is that you will be able to see exactly, where your weaknesses are, what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right. And you can use that then as a prompt to, if you need to go back, for example, and you see, okay, I'm really bad on this particular part of, E1 or P1 or F1. I need to go back and revise this a little bit. So that really is, that's the problem, is it depends on how you're doing. It depends on how you feel in the last couple of days, for example, if you did a mock exam recently and there was an issue with, you know, your P knowledge or your F knowledge, in that case, obviously, the priority is to go back and do some theory review on that particular part of your studies. On the other hand, if your mock exams seem to be going well, you don't seem to have any major issues with your theoretical knowledge, it might be a good idea then to focus on the pre-scene document, to go back and re-watch the pre-scene analysis videos, that, for example, so that you have a good overview, a good kind of general sense of all the key issues and all of the topics that you need to remember and all of the problems that might come up on the day of the exam. So it does depend on your progress through the materials, how you feel your mock exams are going. If you're not getting corrections, of course, you know, you can try to be your own marker, so to speak. So you can look at your answers and try to be honest with yourself and think to yourself, okay, what did I do badly? What did I do well? Use that then as a prompt to go back, need to look at this theory a little bit more, need to look at this area of the pre-scene document a little bit more. So in that sense, it's very hard to say, you know, if there's a one best approach the last few days before the exam, because it really does depend on your progress as a student. I don't know if the other lads want to add something to that.
Not really, Hugo. No, I think that's good advice.
I think we're spot
on. Alexandra makes a comment there about technical issues too. I had technical issues in August 2020, and they allowed me to do it again in August. In August in the session for people with technical issues. Unfortunately, I had technical issues again, so I got the voucher valid till July 2021 for next exam. Well, that's very interesting. I think, you know, Cima seems to be dealing with cases on a case-by-case basis. You can have bad luck, or you know, to be fair to Cima, you know, we've heard a few stories of people who have had genuine bad luck, and in those cases, what we've seen is that Cima tends to be pretty good. You know, they tend to make allowances and things like that, and try to help students. Bato says, I have subscribed to the All Access package and want to know if I need to do more reading over and above the core material content provided for the different topics. Or was the core material created to capture the main areas of each topic such that I don't really need to read further unless I want to expand my knowledge? Okay, that's an interesting question, Bato. So in each of our courses, there are a few different sections. You know, and yes, the main area is the core material. Okay, so that is the most important to go through. Now, having said that, there is also an area with the mock exams, which is, I would say, equally important. So the mock exams you definitely want to be doing as well. If you cover those two, the core materials, the mock exams, you should be pretty well set. If you've got more time, you can go to the first tab is, it is, the name escapes me actually, it's preparatory material or something like that. It's kind of what you would do in advance of getting into the core materials and the mock exams, and it gives some general advice about the course, and it kind of talks about exam technique and things like that. Really good to look at that too. And then if you have time at the end, you could move to the fourth section, which is supplementary material, which links to some articles and things like that. And that's more a nice to have. So if you have some time, you could focus on that. So that's the way I would go through an individual course.
Yeah. Just want to say that the YouTube video, don't make this common study mistake, helped me a lot before my OCS. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for that comment. It's very, very nice. It actually made me purchase the MCS package from VIVA. I recommend the video to all students, especially before a case study exam. That's a very, very nice thing. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Milena. Yeah, I actually have the link to that video here. I'll just share it with everyone.
Is that one of my ones?
Sorry?
Is that one that I did? That one?
It was me and you, Tom. We did that together. Yeah.
With the plant in front of us, right?
That's right. We had a fake plant.
With the VIVA plant. Yeah.
The VIVA plant, yeah.
Good. No, that's great. That's great. I'm very glad that helped you.
Yeah, it is useful actually. Some of the stuff we discussed there. Use it myself. So I shared it there. It's at the top of the comment section.
Great.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Milena.
So Siddharth says, would it be a good idea to create scenarios adapting past exam questions with the current pre-scene, or just take the questions alone from the past exams? That's a good question. I think there's value in adapting past questions, and seeing, could I answer this for my OCS, my MCS, the SCS? The only risk there, though, is that from February 20, before February 20, the syllabus changed for all 3 subjects, and probably the most for the OCS. That's why when you go on the CIMA website, they don't have the old exam papers for the OCS anymore, because it's changed so much. So just be careful. If you are looking at old questions, you may run into a situation where there's off-syllabus content, and you could be there going, okay, I'm not prepared for this. And then it turns out that it's not testable. So just be very careful. For example, with the SCS, cyber risk is heavily tested these days. So if you're looking at old papers, it won't be on that, because it was only introduced in 2019 onwards. So November 2019. So the first time students would have seen that in February 20. So by all means do that. Have a look at the suggested solutions, but look at the contemporary papers and the prototype papers rather than the very, very old papers. That's my tip, really.
Yeah. Let's see. So Ezekiel says, I'm preparing to write the SCS exam in August 2021. May I know if you plan on having SCS tuition for August 2021? Absolutely, Ezekiel. So we cover all of the case study windows, all of the levels, OCS, MCS, and SCS. So we're going to run live classes actually for August, and we'll send out notification of when they start. So if you're a VIVA customer, you'll get access to all of those classes. Okay. Val asks, is the offer for all access only valid during the webinar? Val, no, it's available for the next 48 hours. So what I will do after this session as well is I'll email everyone the link to the offer. Okay. Just taking note. Okay.
So the next question is from Olamide, and the question says, my professional career started in the financial accounting route, and that's all I have done until I decided to venture into the world of management accounting. I'm at a loss as to how to make the switch from a traditional accountant to a management accountant and convince a potential employer to see me as such. Any words of advice? That's a really good question. And, I did similar actually myself. So I started off in management accounting, then I went into treasury. So I was a treasurer for a business, a large business in Ireland. And then I moved into commercial finance. So I've changed, careers in finance, and obviously now I'm teaching finance. So I've changed a lot. The thing that you need is, some demonstration of things that you've done that relate to management accounting. And there's an intersection between all of the different aspects of finance. Whether you're doing financial or management reporting, you're still putting accounts together. So management accounting, yeah, there's lots of areas that are different for sure. But at the end of the day, you're still putting through journals. You're still understanding a budget versus an actual figure. So if there's any areas that you can demonstrate that are related to management accounting, or financial accounting, then give them. There's so many areas you wouldn't even, I suppose, think about it. But if you think hard, even just checking the bank, it's an example of treasury, or if you're doing journals from different bank accounts, that's treasury, you know what I mean? So if you can just demonstrate these things in an interview, I think you're halfway there. But I think the guys might have different opinions. I know, Thomas, you've sort of changed a bit as well. And
yeah, I mean, I've changed over the years. I mean, I started out in corporate finance and did a few things there, and now I'm doing something different, which I'm not doing accounts or anything like that anymore. But I was doing teaching for a number of years with VIVA. I've had to step back from that, unfortunately. Really, in the last few months, I really like it, but somebody needs to run the business, I suppose. So I've stepped back from that, and it's more Hugh and Hugo that do that now. But Olamide, the obvious one is you are working towards the CIMA qualification, and CIMA is really management accounting first, so that should really stand you in good stead and be something that you can show to your employer. I think CIMA is very respected, so that should definitely help. Vicky, that comment, well, you just made my week. Vicky says, the best money I ever spent was on Viva's All Access. I love it. Thank you. Wonderful. That is absolutely fantastic, and I love to hear that. That's fantastic. So Batho says, oh, unfortunately got the all access at $299. Will there be a discount on the case study marking and feedback price? Maybe next time consider adding 2 mocks marking and feedback to the $299 as a special in place of the price reduction, because I feel it's very important to get feedback over and above the solutions provided. Okay, Batho. Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that all access is very, very good value even at $299. Okay, so there is that. And there's actually we are running a discount at the moment on case study marking. I think that's still running, Hugo.
That is still running. Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, we still have those prices. So
let's send those links.
I can pop in the links now if you want.
Yeah, please do. So Batho will include those links where there's a reduced price for the next day or two, I think, for case study marking. You're right. That marking is important. Students benefit a lot from it. We've seen it time and again that their scores go up when they get marking, and especially getting that first mock marked. It's even very good students can be making some mistakes that are impacting on their score, and it's very obvious to our markers because they've marked so many mocks. They know what a good mock is, but it mightn't be too obvious to the student. And when they get that feedback for the first mock, especially, it can be a real eye opener. And it can really help. Okay. Ezekiel, take care. You're exiting to join a meeting. It was great to have you. Good question here, I think. Aniket, what memory techniques do you suggest for long-term retention? Because sometimes I feel that I lost touch, but have not fully forgotten the smaller concepts from previous papers. That's a great question. It's kind of and it's a profound question. It's touching on how do we as human beings learn best and retain best. And good learning, I suppose. There are 2 big things. One is how to best understand what you're being shown in the moment. So that's about focusing, paying attention, etc. And then the second part, of course, is actually remembering what you learned, because you can learn something and understand it very well and not retain it. Okay. Now, kind of, because I think the first thing is, if you do make the effort to actually understand something when it's shown to you initially, you greatly improve your chance of memorizing it. At least that's has been my experience. I think we've all done it where we were younger, where you're at school and you just learn something, and you don't really understand it, and you think you're taking the shortest path to learning by just memorizing without understanding. And I think you're doomed to failure if that's the case. Certainly, I don't have a very good memory, so I need to understand something if I have any chance of retaining that information. Hugo, your microphone has gone off, or not your microphone, your camera. Is that intentional? We also can't hear you. He's just dropped out.
It's a long day.
Okay. It's a long day, yeah. Long week. Not to worry. Okay, so look, the first thing I would say is really it's about making the effort, first of all, to really understand what you're being shown in the moment. Take the time, and it can be more difficult to just make that effort initially to actually understand what you're being shown. And then in terms of memory techniques, I know there are all sorts of fancy techniques people try to use. There's the memory palace, for example. It's just kind of, I think, I've experimented with that a little bit. Again, it probably takes more initial effort to get that right. Some people probably have joy with it. It's not something I use in an ongoing way. So that one is where, and that's an ancient method. I think it comes from ancient Greece or ancient Rome, where you use something like your apartment or your house. You would take a room there. It could be the living room, and you're very familiar with the objects and seats and everything in your room. And what you would do there is you would attach some point that you've learned to an object. Okay, so you might have your sofa and you would locate some theory that you were learning about to the sofa. And what that does then is it kind of it solidifies the learning, or it makes it more tangible in some way, so that then when you're trying to recall something in your own mind's eye, you walk into the room, and sitting on the couch is activity-based costing, and it could take the form of someone well, for example. So it's a silly example, but actually they say the sillier the better, so that you're using images can be very, very effective in that way. So you're using a silly image. It could be your dad wearing a clown outfit, while balanced with one foot on top of a horse or something like that. That's a very memorable image. And your dad would be holding a Cima textbook, and it's got activity-based costing written on the front or something like that. That's something you would remember very clearly. So there are all those techniques. Some of them are really cool, so check them out. That's a really famous one. So that's the memory palace. Explore that one. That could be a good one. Other memory techniques, guys, that you can think of?
Try and teach it. That's
a great one.
Good one. Try and teach it. I think when you end up trying to teach something, then you realize, okay, I really have to understand it now. I know myself, some of the subjects that we teach, when you go to the effort of trying to teach someone that doesn't know that particular area, you end up getting a greater understanding of it. So even if it's just a friend, or, some people these days are connecting with other CMA students via Facebook and WhatsApp. And I see there's loads of groups these days for certain exams. People are joining loads of these kind of, there's different apps. I know conscious is not just WhatsApp. Some people use WeChat. If you're in China, I see there's these groups as well. So, by all means, try that.
Yeah.
So Milena, there you're saying, will the mock marking offer be valid after the webinar as well? The mock marking we will be running until tomorrow. The discount. So tomorrow we'll be setting that back to the regular prices, Milena. So yeah, you still have some time.
So again, we'll send the links after this webinar to everyone who's attended, so that you have those links as well.
Yeah, and they're there in the chat box as well if you want to bring them up.
Great. So maybe we'll take one more question and then we'll call it an evening.
Cool. So Danielle has a question. Thanks for all the tips. No problem at all. No problem at all. So just one question further to my P3 query, and it's a good subject to ask questions about. I think it now has the second highest failure rate in CIMA's portfolio. So certainly another subject that people are struggling with. Is there any question banks you would recommend? I've used the Kaplan Bank, the Cima aptitude test. These have worked fine in the past. Any other ones you'd recommend? So inside your All Access, if you're an All Access member, you have access to the our own banks, which are quite good. But also, on top of that, inside the BPP textbooks that we have for P3, there's some good questions at the end of every chapter. It's good to get just questions from different people sometimes, because that writer maybe might have a different perspective to the other writer. The Cima aptitude tests are great, and I'm glad you use those. Those are really good. Sometimes the questions could be somewhat similar to what you get in the exam, so that's a good one. I recommend going into the BPP textbook for a bit of, I suppose, contrast to Kaplan. They have different set of writers to BPP. We have a different set of writers to us. So, use different sources. Why not? I think that's a good idea. Try and get as many as you can.
Yeah. So the more the merrier, I think. Yeah. Okay, guys, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for taking the time to attend on a Friday evening. Very, very impressive. And have a great weekend. We'll send that email out after in the next couple of minutes with the different links. And for those of you who are sitting the case study exam soon, the very best of luck to you.
Yep. All the best, guys. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.